Okay, is it going? Okay, I am the mower guy, Ralph, the mower guy. What we're gonna do, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. I had a surgery recently, and I repair mowers as a business now. That's what I do. And I looked at a bunch of the YouTube videos, and it's kind of a source of humor for me because it's like a guy that every mower he does a compression leak down test. That's really, I don't mean to knock the guy, but I guess a good way to pass time, but completely pointless. I guess he's showing off his compression tester. That's useful on a car, but not this. So what we're gonna do, we have a Craftsman self-propelled mower with an electric starter, and with a Briggs and Stratton 6.75 self-choking. There's no primer on this carburetor engine, but a friend of mine, I told him I needed a mower to do on my video. He picked this one up, which is going to be on this one I'm going to do an overview of how everything functions this week. Then next week we're going to repair it. I'll show you how to fix it, see if we can get it running. And then next week will be a self-propelled mower with a Kohler engine on it. So I'm going to do each model of engine where you can find your specific mower and see exactly what to do. Because a lot of them, the guys, they will say like, well, you know, a Honda, it's like a Kohler, you know, I understand that, but you don't. So we're going to go system by system and how it works all in harmony to make the blade turn to cut your grass. Just one thing real quick. It's like I've been in the military, nuclear weapons, artillery. I've driven a truck. I've done construction. I'm an x-ray technician. Now I happen to be a mower repair guy. So, you know, whatever you do, a doctor, a lawyer, a financial guy, whatever, all you lack to be able to fix this is a few tools and the knowledge. So, and the will to do it. So if you have the will and the tools or the ability to get them, you're about to have the knowledge. And the reason I'm doing an overview is of the many videos I've watched, none of them have an overview of how they'll fix a specific problem kind of randomly. And so we are going to, I'm going to show each system how it works to a molecular level, I guess. Because if you know how something functions, you can actually diagnose it. If you do not know how it functions, you're kind of like a monkey with a wrench in your hand, changing, you know, piece by piece, hoping for the best. So anyway, as I said, this mower was picked up from the throwaway pile in the neighborhood pickup, and we are going to start. I disassembled everything where it'll go faster, but just right off the bat, probably why it did not run is the owner never changed the filter, which is horrendous, and whoever owned it tilted it to the left with the carburetor down and saturated the filter with oil. You never tilt the mower. If you tilt it that way, you're going to dump all your oil into your muffler. If you tilt it this way, as this person did, it will dump all your oil out of your carburetor. So, you remove this one screw, and in disassembling it, so this is the filter housing. The 3 tabs go in like this, and that goes right here. That cleans, it filters and cleans the air going into your carburetor, into the engine. So now we have here the gas tank, which is 3 screws and a mounting screw at the bottom. And all that does is supply gravity feed fuel to the carburetor. Then you have the starter assembly, the rope recoil system right here. 2 screws in the front, 2 in the back. And the way that functions is when you pull the rope, it throws 2 what's called pawls, P-A-W-L-S, out like that. And it engages into this cap, which then turns and starts your engine. And this goes right here, right on top. So now we have that out of the way. And as I said, I'm going to reassemble this, and next week we're going to go through step-by-step diagnosis. And I see no reason why it shouldn't run, so we'll have this running next week. So on this one, we'll start with the carburation system on this particular mower. You have here is the choke. Let's see if it's working. Yeah. This door right here is the choke. So when it's not running, this choke is closed, and so when you pull the rope, it creates a vacuum which will suck fuel out of your carburetor bowl into the engine and ignite it with the plug here starting. So then once this particular engine starts, the rotation of the flywheel that has these fins on it, it will partially blow back and open the choke a little bit where it will stay running. Then when if this was by itself, it would just remain kind of choking, sucking up too much gas. But what happens is over here, on the muffler, there's a little system with this arm that it has a spring in it. The spring gets hot, it expands, and this little arm will push the choke all the way off. So when I push it here, it's all the way forward. The door is all the way open. So there, and this is all the way forward, that's all the way open. It's running now at its proper speed. So it's closed, pull the rope, it chokes the gas up, it partially opens. This mechanism warms up the spring, it expands and pushes the choke all the way off, and then it opens, it runs wide open. It runs at the governed speed, the speed it is governed to run at. So now we have the carburetor that's how the carburetor functions. And okay, so now we know how the choke functions, and the carburetor, it comes off like this. You never bend or twist or anything. There's 2 bolts. Take this out, and then you work the linkage out of the flutter valve. Okay, so now then we got the choke, and this controls controls the amount of air coming into the carburetor, which controls the amount of fuel that is picked up by the carburetor. So the way this carburetor functions is just really basically, I believe it's called the Bertolli effect, where any air mass moving over any surface creates a low pressure. So essentially your carburetor, there's a float right here that regulates the amount of fuel that's in your carburetor. The bottom of this tube is in the fuel. The top is right in, you can see it, the little brass piece right in here is the top right here. So the air flowing over this creates low pressure, which sucks the fuel up. And then there's a couple of little holes here that pressurize the tank a little bit. But that is essentially what happens. So, as I said, that's called the Bertolli effect. And an example of that, a physical example, this is called a siphon gun, that the air is going to flow over a little tube in here, and it's going to suck this liquid out of this can. So here we go. It's going to shoot out of here. Boom. So that is what's happening in the carburetor. When it initially chokes, because there's not enough air mass flowing through the carburetor, then when it's running, it's sucking a great amount of air in there. The airflow over that pickup tube sucks the fuel, just like you saw the siphon hose, through this intake. This is, I guess, called the intake manifold. The carburetor's hooked here, and it runs the tube all the way across here to the intake valve. And then it sucks into the piston, fires it, and then blows it out the exhaust. And we'll get into that in a minute. So now, to continue on the function of the carburetor, this is one that's a little better. Here's the choke. That's the piece that the heat pulls the choke off. This is start. It goes here, the air partially open, it warms up, and then it opens all the way. Then this runs off what's called a governor. We'll cover that in a minute. And it will regulate the amount of air flowing in, which governs how much gas is picked up. The fuel, so that it doesn't pick up a huge dump of fuel, this is called a metering jet. And in the middle of this hole is a little tiny hole that I actually clean with a hair out of a wire brush. So most of the time when a mower's not running, this little hole is clogged up, the gas solidifies on it. So the gas sucks in these two little holes, here and here, up through here, into this pickup tube, which goes into your engine. So here is the inside of the carburetor, and there is the bottom of the pickup tube right here, the little brass. So the gas is sucked up through that, regulated by the jet, and picked up into that little atomized and thrown into the engine. Then this, it goes up and down. It's called the float. You pull the float pin, which is right here, and you take the float up, and there's the needle valve, which the needle valve, the float going up and down, turns the gas on and off, which keeps a constant level of gas inside of the bowl of the carburetor. So the float is moving up and down within the parameters of the bowl here. Then that little needle valve, as you can see, is solid metal, and it achieves a complete seal by this little, is called the seat. So that's a little rubber seat that when you're changing it, there's a little machined ridge inside of that, and there's a ridge. When you pull out a needle valve, it's flat on one side, and it's got a indentation on the other side. The indentation goes in. So the needle valve works by the float up and down against this, opening and closing the gas going in your carburetor. What happens also, the alcohol causes these seats to get fat, and your float, when it is right, it should be flat like this. If you take your carburetor apart and it's open like that, that means that seat is fattened up. It won't let enough gas in to run. So you need to change the seat if it is not flat. So now then, going on, that's the fuel regulation and introduction to the engine of the fuel. So now then, we're going to go to what ignites the fuel, which is the spark plug. How that spark is achieved, when you pull back this handle, what that does is it pulls this switch, this mechanism here, which what that does, you can see right here is a brake that when you let go of the handle, this brake slams against the flywheel and stops the rotation. It's a safety device. Then right here is a switch, and the wire runs from that switch to a contact under the coil. So when you push the handle down to start it, that pulls this mechanism back, taking the brake off and opening the switch. Can you see the top here? Then when you let the handle go, the brake slams on and it makes contact with this switch, running the fire generated by the coil to ground. So it runs to ground instead of the plug. The flywheel is braked and the fire runs to ground. The plug stops firing, the engine stops. So now the coil is this right here. This is a magnet. This is a piece of... Anyway, this is a PS. We turn the camera back on. What I'm going to do is a video a week on repairing the mowers. Each model very specific. You can find your mower and know exactly what to do on that mower instead of the really general from the other guys that I see. I mean, they're good, most of them, some of them, but it's just not real specific. And sadly, I mean, you know, again, not knocking it, but not really clear. A lot of them right in the critical spot, their hands are covering what you need to see. But we're going to do a mower at least one a week. And then in addition to that, because, as I said, I've done a lot of things in my life. I happen to be repairing mowers now. But I like to talk about things like life, love, happiness, where we are, why we're here, whatever. So I'm going to do a video on a mower and one thought of the day, which this week is where are we, what's going on here, and why are we here. So hope you like that one. Check it out, see what you think. Let me know what you think. I really I don't know if I'm insecure or what, but I would like some feedback, good, bad, or ugly. So thank you. Be better. Metal. Any metallic object moving through any magnetic field creates an electrical current. So if I hook a positive and negative lead on a multimeter on this, and I swiped it through this magnetic field like this, you would get a measurable current on these two ends. So essentially, that is what is happening on your flywheel. There's a magnet here that rotates through the coil, and what it does, it generates a current here, and then the second magnet turns it's got electronics inside of it. It charges a little capacitor. Then this tells it to close and sends the current to the spark plug, making a spark. So every time it rotates through that field, it makes a spark. It opens a contact, makes a spark, and then closes the contact, sends a spark down to the plug. So the way that you check this coil, a definitive check, because you might have a grounded wire or a bad switch, or you're not the connection opening all the way. You disconnect this wire. Where's that rascal there? From the coil. That way this coil is completely isolated from any control on the mower. You pull the rope, have someone holding the plug against the ground of, here you go, doggone it. You put it like this, have your significant other yank the rope, and you'll see a spark between these two contacts. If there's no spark, you have a bad coil. If there's a spark, you either are not opening your contact all the way, or it is grounded on your wire somewhere, on the kill wire. That's the way you definitively check the coil. You isolate it from the machine, so you have to reassemble it where you pull it. And, you know, boom, there you go. So now, that's how the spark is achieved. And here, very simply, the flywheel is rotating, magnet coil, magnet through the metallic coil, electronic, creates a spark. Pretty simple. Now the mechanics of how it functions mechanically. If you look here, let me open that brake again. So this flywheel right here, this machine, and every mower is just different configurations of this, except some of them lack this choke pull off. It'll have a primer ball or a manual choke. So the way this engine functions is really simple. Here's the flywheel on the top of the engine, the coil. The crank comes down here with a piston hook to it. So as this rotates, this goes back and forth, making the piston go up and down. On the crank, just very simply, there's eccentric lobes that open and close your exhaust and intake in harmony to create power to turn your output shaft, which in this case has a blade hooked to it to cut your grass. So this mower, it has here, where'd I put that rascal? Oh boy, oh here it is. So this flywheel, there's a slot cut in it, and on the top of the crank it's a cone, and so there's a cone, corresponding cone here. And so the reason that is, as this engine is running, there's a lot of angular momentum and energy in this flywheel. So say you hit a stump, then what that does, this is called a flywheel key. It's made from soft aluminum. And you hit a stump, the engine stops. If this was hooked solidly, it would almost certainly bend and damage your crank. But they put it on, it's like a brake to dump your inertia. And so what it does, it will cut your, it will allow the flywheel to spin, dumping the inertia along this cone here, so that you don't damage your, like serious damage on the engine. So to make the valves and piston work in harmony, this is like timing. This goes in this slot like that. Anyway, you get the idea. The key goes in like that. So if you hit something, your engine is not running, you take this top bolt off, the nut, take this off, and you look, and if it is, you will see that offset. That's like your car being out of, it won't run, or you'll pull the rope and it'll jerk the rope out of your hand because it's firing in the wrong place. So one of the things you check if it's not starting is that flywheel key. That's got to be intact just like that. So we'll take that off, and then the piece that works with the carburetor, this is called the governor. This is the governor spring. So this has a little round mechanical thing on the inside with weights on it that it's always trying to pull and make it run slower. I might be wrong, slower or faster. Let me see. I'm trying to move fast here, so it's trying to make it run slower. Then this spring is pulling. This spring works in contention against the governor. So by adjusting the tension on this spring, by bending this tab, you adjust the speed of the engine. So the governor, if it's running fast, it'll run away. If this is not functioning, your engine just runs really fast. And the reason that is there, say that you're running at say 2,800 RPM. You hit tall grass, the engine starts slowing down. The spring will, because this stops pulling back, then it allows the spring to give it gas automatically. So no matter what the load is on the engine, it maintains an RPM of 2,800 RPM. So that's how this works in conjunction with the dadgum carburetor. So now the last thing here, well, one of the last things, in the head, if you take the head off, all this is just a flat head. There's the plug. And when you move the engine, yeah, boy, where's my button? So this one, here's your exhaust, here's your intake. So this is called a 4-cycle engine because as you turn it, here's top dead center, so down this would be this intake just closed, so this would be the power. So in other words, it just sucked gas in and compressed it. It's top dead center. You see the key is here, so it's in the firing position, and it fires the air fuel mixture down, the piston goes, and boom, that's power. Now you see this exhaust valve opening, up comes the piston, the burned air fuel mixture is now going out your muffler. So that's intake, power, exhaust. Shoot, okay, here you go, intake. Air coming in. Compression, they're both closed. So now it's compressing the air fuel mixture. It's top dead center, boom. There's the power. So intake, compression, power, and then now it's going back up, exhaust. over and over. Intake, compression, power, exhaust. So that's why that flywheel key is critical. If it's even indented a little bit, it radically affects how this engine works. Now, this happens to be, for some reason, people buy self-starting. I can see on a bigger engine, but this one, if you can't pull this rope to start it, you probably need somebody cutting your grass. But under here, you have a little 12-volt battery. And in this case, on a larger load, you'd have what's called a solenoid. But on this one, it's just a solid wire coming from the battery that runs all the current through the switch. So when you turn this switch to start it, you're actually closing a circuit that is running the current from the battery directly to these two wires into your starter. It's got a reduction gear on it here that spins your engine. What it does is when it spins, it kicks these teeth up. The Bendix arm kicks the teeth up, engages the teeth into these gears. The engine turns, boom, you start the engine. Now, on this particular mower, and most of them, there's different ways, but to achieve the self-propelled drive. And so on this rascal, very simple system, and the cable is torqued, but can't pull it. But what happens is this cable right here runs up to the handle for the drive. So when you pull the handle to engage the drive, it pulls this whole mechanism back, tightening the belt that drives your wheels. Then in the wheels, you have here an axle running, and it's a little gear that just is meshed with the gears in the outer diameter of the inside of the tire. So you tighten this, you pull the handle, it tightens the belt, very simple, drives the little gear that turns the gears in the outside of the wheel. And these wheels have to be frozen on here because it's left in the rain, but I'll cover that next week because we're going to fix this one. So then the belt is hooked to right here. This is the output shaft. The blade is hooked here. There's a pulley right here that your belt goes around that pulley, and I'll cover that next week. But around that pulley under the engine to here, you pull the handle, boom, it tightens the belt, turns the little gear on your axles, your drive axles, into the teeth of the wheels. So that's pretty much it. It's just they're very simple, very easy to diagnose, and I guess that's about it on this. If there's any questions or comments, do the question comment thing. I'll try to answer them. If not, my camera guy Kyle will do that. He's getting pretty adept at fixing these things, and he's got a full prescription of his Adderall, so he'll be pretty amped up. He'll be able to answer anything, maybe more than you want to know, but yeah, he'll answer it anyway. So as I said, next week we're gonna fix this mower. I see no reason why it should not run. We might have to replace something, but so the typical stuff, if you like what you see, subscribe, ring the bell, And if you would be so kind, please support me on Patreon and PayPal. And as I said, what I'm going to do is one mower each week with a specific model to where you can find your mower and see exactly what to do on your mower. This is the chassis or the body of each mower. This one is it's a Craftsman model 917.37648. That's everything except the engine. The engine is a 6.75 horsepower Briggs and Stratton, which if you go down to get parts, you have to have the model number off of the actual engine, which in this case is on this little tab, and it's a model number, whatever the heck it is, 26105-1071-B1 080400857. You cannot buy parts for this engine unless you have that. If you're buying parts for the engine, you need the engine model number. If you're buying for the mower, you need the model number of the mower. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to help you. Very unlikely. And it speeds things up. So, questions, comments, bell, subscribe. All donations help, appreciated. I will see you next week, and we're going to get this mower running and probably donate it to someone who needs a mower. As a matter of fact, I know somebody, so this one will be donated to a young lad with a family and struggling a bit. So we'll see you next week.